authors. In the past, we have met at the main Roswell Library, and we hope to return to their newly remodeled meeting space once the library reopens and we get the all clear to resume large group meetings there. In the meantime, we are all earning advanced degrees in technology, so kudos to all of you who are learning and growing during this time. A few technology housekeeping items. All of our audience members are on mute. If you have any issues during the presentation, or if you would like to submit a question for Sonia, please use the chat function. We will have a Q&A session at the end, and your questions will be presented to Sonia at that time. Also, a suggestion, you might want to change your screen view from gallery view to speaker view so that you see the speaker on the large screen rather than all the audience members in a collage. I'd like to begin by thanking Gail Reed, the chairperson of Atlanta Authors, who coordinates these events. And special thanks to Fran Seegers of Friends of the Roswell Library joining us today to assist with Zoom functionality. Yes, thank you, Fran. I also want to introduce the other members of the Atlanta Authors Committee. They include Deanna Smith, Marilyn Barron, Judy Stanton, Hillary Hamlin, and me. Several of us also volunteer for Roswell Reads, another volunteer group that annually selects a book and puts together programming for our One City, One Book Roswell event. It's another great program that promotes literacy and lifelong learning through the shared community-wide experience of reading and discussing a common book. We also want you to know that signed copies of Sonia's book are available for purchase at Bookmiser at a 20% discount off the cover price. And may I add that autographed books make great gifts. Bookmiser is located at 3822 Roswell Road, and we're less than a 10-minute drive from most areas in Roswell. So go to bookmiser.net for more information, and we'll also add this to the chat area of your screen so you can find it there as well. Today's program will unfold as follows. We will begin with brief bios of both our moderator and our guest author. We'll proceed with the In Conversation presentation itself. That will be followed with questions that you, the audience, have submitted via chat. We will conclude the session with final comments. And finally, at approximately 3 o'clock, a very special opportunity. We will unmute everyone for 10-ish minutes of open conversation with our author. Okay, let's get started. Our moderator this afternoon is the multi-talented Marilyn Barron. Marilyn is an award-winning Atlanta author who writes in a variety of genres, from women's fiction to historical romance thrillers and romantic suspense to paranormal fantasy. She was just contracted for her 27th work of fiction, The Romanoff Legacy, by the Wild Rose Press. A public relations consultant in Atlanta by day, she is immediate past co-chair of the Roswell Read Steering Committee, a member of Romance Writers of America, Georgia Romance Writers, and Atlanta Writers Club. And we thank you, Marilyn, for all you do for this organization and for moderating today.
Thank you.
Our guest author, Sonia Kamal, was born in Pakistan. She grew up in England and Saudi Arabia and has lived the American experience via time spent living in New Mexico, Maryland, Virginia, Colorado, Illinois, New Jersey, California, and Georgia. We are here today in part because of her aunt, an aunt who gave 16-year-old Sonia a copy of Pride and Prejudice. Did she read it promptly? Of course not. As any teenager will tell you, the book is too thick. But eventually, she did read it. And from the opening line through the last and on to each of Jane Austen's books that followed, reading Austen was a game changer, planting the seed that would eventually become unmarriageable. And I think also steering Sonia toward her current status of really a universally sought after authority on Jane and her writing and her times. Sonia hosted the year-long Jane Austen 200th anniversary commemoration book club for all 6 Austen novels, and she wrote about it in Pride and Possibilities. She was chief guest at the 2019 Jasna, North California Jane Austen Birthday Gala and delivered the Jane Austen Birthday Toast. She has also served as a Jane Austen Literacy Ambassador for the Jane Austen Literacy Foundation. And we haven't even begun discussing her writing. Sonia's list of literary works is extensive. Essays, short fiction, newspaper columns, editor for numerous literary formats, script consultant, book, TV, and movie reviews, blogger, TED Talks, and of course, 2 novels. An Isolated Incident was published in 2017, and Unmarriageable was published in 2019, and publication of the anthology A Measure of Belonging, 21 Writers of Color on the New American South, was released just October 6th and includes Sonia's poignant essay, Face. Her works have been honored with an impressive resume of awards and book list rankings, and the list is very, very long. A few highlights include Financial Times Reader's Best Book of 2019, an NPR Code Switch selection, 2019 Summer Read Pick, a Georgia Center for the Books 2019 pick for books all Georgians should read, an Amazon Best Books pick, a Library Reads pick, a People Magazine pick, Publishers Weekly Starred Review, Library Journal Starred Review, Shelf Awareness Starred Review. Both novels were also shortlisted for the Townsend Award for Fiction. Really, just go to her website and see the complete list of her work, her awards, and her participation in worldwide literary events. Her mark on our world is impressive and inspiring. And along with her writing and globetrotting for book-related events, she has also taught creative writing and global literature at Emory University, Oglethorpe University, and as faculty at Reinhardt University. She has served as writer-in-residence for the Fulton County Library System and is a repeat mentor for the Association of Writers and Writing Programs. And did we mention she's a mom and a wife? I can only imagine that Jane Austen would be so proud. Thank you again, Sonia, for taking time to be with us today. So audience, get ready for a memorable literary hour. Marilyn, the mic is yours.
Thank you, Annelle. First, let me say I absolutely loved your book, Sonia. It was sophisticated, funny, delightful, and I recommend anyone who hasn't read it yet to go to get a copy. We're so excited to have you here at Atlanta Authors. I'm a fangirl, and it's wonderful to have so many of your fans here with us this afternoon. So first, could you tell us about the origin of Unmarriageable and how the novel came to be?
Of course. Thank you first, though, Annelle, for that amazing bio. It's always so interesting to hear about yourself, but this one was truly something else. Thank you for it. Thank you for Bookmiser for selling Unmarriageable, and to Atlanta Authors for inviting me for their series. And Marilyn, thank you so much for agreeing to moderate this panel. It's truly my pleasure to be here. The origins of Unmarriageable, how I came about it. Okay, so quick little thing. My aunt actually gave me a copy of Pride and Prejudice. I think I was around 12, 13, 14. I don't remember exactly. And it must have been 12 or 13. And she didn't put the date in the book itself. So I don't know. She did give an inscription with my cousin's names. And this is the book she gave me. So it was really, really, really gorgeous, red leather and gold lettering. And yes, Annelle was right. When she first gave it to me, I did look at how thick it was. And then I opened it up and read the first sentence, which is, it is the truth universally acknowledged, single man in possession of a good fortune must be in want of a wife. And I was like, I'm not reading this. This is too long, and I don't know what this sentence is trying to say, and I'm not reading this long book with sentences like this. And then I don't know, I think I was 16 or so, and I don't know, I really don't know. It was maybe a rainy day, but what I had been doing throughout, though, was that this book had what the book refers to as colored plates, and we now call illustrations, which were the book is honestly falling apart at this point, illustrations like this. And this one has Elizabeth, and it didn't give names, but it has a woman standing at the threshold and 4 people looking at her shocked. And I was always in trouble, and people were looking at me like that too, growing up. So I connected with that. And then finally at 16, I opened it up and I just read it cover to cover. And I loved it, but it was as if Austen had written about Pakistani society. I was in Pakistan at that time. And I could see her characters all around me. My mother was Mrs. Bennet in so many ways. So many mothers around me were Mrs. Bennet. And I know other people, not just from Pakistan, but also from that particular region. And also from more traditional cultures, be they Russian, Jewish, Italian, etc. I've often seen their mothers and Mrs. Bennet too, as I learned with time. So I wasn't the only one with a mother like that. But, it really, really resonated with me. But moreover, I was as nice as the love stories always are, Elizabeth and Darcy and are they going to get together? For me, it was definitely what connected was Austen's critique of the social pretensions around her and the institutions which gave birth to people like Mr. Collins and Catherine de Bourgh. And what I think I appreciated, but didn't know how to put in words at age 16, but I really appreciated was that Austen never resorts in her novels to physical comedy. She doesn't mock people and she doesn't make fun of people. People are not targets, for our laughter because of what they look like, or that they slipped on a banana peel and hit their head and how funny. She doesn't do any of that sort of situational comedy. Her comedy is so refined, and she critiques the institutions that give birth to people and ideas rather than those ideas, rather than those people. And that really connected with me, and I just fell in love with her work. I, funnily enough, never meant to be a writer. I meant to be an actress. And if anyone's watched my TEDx talk, they will hear the full details of my very sad story about why that didn't happen. I even got acting offers and stuff, but my father, I come from a Muslim background, and it was not considered respectable at that time. Just as in the US, you might have grandmothers or mothers who wanted to join the stage or acting or singing, and it was not considered a respectable career at that time either. And it wasn't in Pakistan. So unfortunately, a dream that, it's so seldom sometimes at such a young age, what you want to do. And I wasn't allowed to do that. And I carried that regret, and I will say even bitterness with me for a very, very long time. But I'd always been scribbling since age 8, like you play basketball or you sing in the shower or stuff like that. It's just writing was something. I just told stories. I was a storyteller, and I'd tell stories and scribble things down. I never wanted to be a writer. It wasn't even in my periphery, even though I loved reading. But writing just stuck with me. I came to the US for college in the 90s and continued writing. I think writing just chose me. And then I met my husband my senior year. and got married, and as Anel said, moved around in a lot of different places in the US. And writing was the one thing I could do at home. And I don't know, just stayed with it, even though I had a very funny, resentful relationship with it for a very long time. Um, when I had first read Pride and Prejudice, funnily enough, like I said, even though I didn't want to be a writer, I do remember telling myself or thinking that if I ever write this, if I ever do a retelling of a book, I'm going to do Pride and Prejudice. I didn't even know the word retelling. And I think that happened because I'd spent part of my life in an international school in Saudi Arabia when I was a child, a teenager, adolescent and teenager. And the library there was full of books from all over the world. If you had grown up in the US at that time period, 80s, you might have read, Judy Blume, S.E. Hinton, perhaps Anne of Green Gables and stuff. And if you'd grown up in England, very much an author called Enid Blyton would have been your stock, and she was for across empire and stuff. But because I wasn't in this international school, and there were books from everywhere, in the world, and if the library didn't have them, my that school student body resembled a mini United Nations, and they were friends from Nigeria, Norway, Japan, etc., India, everywhere in the world, bringing in books from their countries. So I got to read a very wide and eclectic range of stories from around the world. But the one book that I could never find, I never saw any, was a book that was set in Pakistan but written in English. And I've grown up in English in Pakistan because of empire, but the English medium system, and in 1947, when Pakistan came into being, it took English as one of its official languages. But growing up, I couldn't see that story. And so when I was a little older, I'm not sure exactly when, I came across, and it's one of the epigraphs in Unmarriageable, Thomas Babington Macaulay, who was part of colonial British Empire, his 1835 address to British Parliament, in which he recommended replacing all the indigenous languages across empire with English, which naturally turned English then into the language of power, privilege, advantage, good jobs, etc. So everyone wanted to learn English, and that legacy just continued throughout empire. And when I read that and realized the origins of the language that is my mother tongue and that was coming out of me, it was a little disturbing. And I decided that I would like to combine my Pakistani heritage that I've grown up with the English language that I've grown up with, and in retelling Austen's Pride and Prejudice, reorient or remap, if you will, the legacy of language in empire, but especially in Pakistan. So that was a very long answer to your one sentence question about
answer.
how Unmarriageable came about. So, and which is why it is what I call a post-colonial parallel retelling. And the parallel is very important because it's not a sequel, prequel. It's not inspired by, like so many novels where you take the character and then you write another story, but you're inspired by one of the characters. This Unmarriageable literally follows the plot of Pride and Prejudice, as well as all the characters are there. And they're new characters too. I mean, it has my own stamp on it also, but it is very much a parallel retelling. It is literally Pride and Prejudice set in Pakistan. And it was very much written to reorient post-colonial and British Empire legacy in empire.
So. Well, I listened to your TED Talk. It's wonderful. If anybody gets a chance, it's really nice. And we're glad you became a writer. Thank goodness.
Thank you.
The second question is, I heard that your first novel, An Isolated Incident, took 10 years to write, and that this book took only 2 months.
Yes.
Can you tell us about that huge disparity?
Sure. Yes, it's one I'm still, people ask, like I'm sure you might want to ask, what am I working on next and what my process is? And because the two novels are so different, I don't know what my process is. I'm hoping I'll find out with something else I write. But An Isolated Incident is set against the Kashmir conflict between India and Pakistan. And my grandfather was a refugee from Srinagar, Kashmir. And And two of his daughters were married and left there when he crossed the border. And so I've seen what needing, I've seen what happens when a place that is your home suddenly becomes a territory with borders around it where you need visas. Um, and I've seen the struggle growing up with families being disconnected because of that, not able to meet whenever they want, and all the stuff that happens when two countries are constantly clashing over territory, and what that does to families and stuff. And on his deathbed, so to speak, near around, my grandfather, like I said, had always seen me writing because I'd been scribbling something or the other since age 8. and and he made me promise that I would write about Kashmir. And of course, I promised him that I would. And I am a novelist predominantly. I write a lot of personal essays also and stuff. But at that point, I was predominantly a novelist. And so the way I could honor that promise I made to him was really through writing a novel. And it took 10 years, because when you are writing, I mean, any good writer, any writer worth their salt is not writing propaganda for any country. The purpose of a novel is to offer a full, complete picture of the theme that you're trying to address, be it marriage and what it means to choose a perfect partner in Unmarriageable, or in an isolated incident, what borders and visas do to families, but also what identity means. It is who has more claim or equal claim or no claim. People who grow up in a country, or people who are of diaspora, and how do those two people connect? So it's about home and the meaning of home, and where we find homes and make homes. But to write about an ongoing conflict sensitively and give everyone their due equally is a very difficult stuff. And I had to do a lot of research, political research for that. And that took 10 years. And I started writing that novel when I was pregnant with my first child. He's now 19. So those 10 years. And then it took a long time to get published also, because sometimes that publishing journey is a different thing, but Unmarriageable came about because I had meant to write it, but I was intimidated about writing an isolated incident for different reasons, which was addressing an ongoing political conflict. It's one thing if you're writing a novel, perhaps, which is set in a conflict which has ended, and the end result of it and everything. But to write about an ongoing one was its own challenges, because there is no end to it right now. So writing about that was to has its own challenges. So I was intimidated by that. But with Unmarriageable, even though I know that I wanted to write it, the fact that I wanted to write a post-colonial retelling, I think when you take on Jane Austen in any way, shape, or form, or especially Pride and Prejudice, which is her most popular book, it's a little intimidating anyway. But then to do it with what I had in mind, which was literally take the same plot and put it in a different country. And I think this is the first one to date which does that. So I really didn't have anything to go by, and I was very intimidated by what some of you may be Janeites here who are diehard Jane Austen fans, and I was intimidated by whether they would like it, or what they would think of someone doing this, or even myself, if I was capable to do what I wanted to do. And it so happened that my writing career was really not going anywhere. Publishing can be very, very hard to begin with, but when you're a writer of color, I think it can be sometimes a little harder to convince a publisher that people will read your words and your voice and your books and stuff. So I then decided, I was in Georgia at that time, and I had 3 kids now, but I decided that, okay, I'll teach. Clearly I'm never going to get published, so I'll fulfill my, being around book people and everything through teaching. And the closest MFA program to me was Georgia State University, and I applied there and I got in, and they gave me funding and scholarship and everything. And it was a 4-year full-time MFA with an academic portion. So I was reading a lot of books also, and doing scholarly research papers. And my MFA thesis, and for an MFA thesis, a master's in creative writing thesis, you have to either do a short story collection or a novel. And the novel that I'd said I'd do was I would do this. I didn't have the title then, the retelling of Pride and Prejudice. And as with any thesis, master's thesis, you should have a year to 2 years. You know, you finish your coursework. We had exams over there. I passed my exams, and it so happened that turned out there was a glitch in the syllabus I'd been given. So I had 2 months to turn in my MFA thesis, which meant I had 2 months to write this entire novel. And you can't just turn in anything when you're turning in a thesis. It has to be somewhat okay. It was a very, very, very excruciatingly hard 2 months. Plop in the middle of those 2 months was the TEDx talk. And if anyone knows anything about TEDx talks, there's no teleprompter. You have to memorize those. You have to write those and memorize those and deliver them. And suddenly these 2 months were very, I had to do that. I had to finish a novel. I actually got very, very sick. So this is not, this is not a writing process I recommend to anyone. People ask me, what's the secret? How do you do this? We want to do it. And I'm like, no, you don't want, there is no secret. Because if there was, I would have written 5 other novels by now.
Well, I can sympathize with you because my first novel took 10 years to write.
Oh, wow.
So
yeah.
I guess we have that in common.
Yeah. Was yours research-based too? And is that the reason? Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah.
I
mean, I will say, I think with Unmarriageable, the reason one thing I do say to people who ask me what the secret is, I think the secret is that if you are writing about a subject matter that you know, and it's set in a milieu and time period, if it's not historical fiction and set in a time period that you've lived through or then you know it firsthand, and so it's much easier to then tap into your own knowledge, that your lived knowledge, and at least that takes care of the setting part of it. So that makes it a little simpler to write, much faster.
Okay. And how has Unmarriageable been received among Pakistani Americans and within Pakistan?
Wonderfully. Like I said, I was intimidated to write this because there were four, usually when I write, I never think of, even with Isolated, I don't think of an audience. Sometimes people will ask, well, who's your audience? You write for yourself, you write what you need to write, and then you hope that it will connect with readers. Mm-hmm. For me, the thing with Unmarriageable was that I figured, okay, some Jane Austen fan and lover is going to pick this up. So there's that reader. Then I'm setting this in Pakistan. So some Pakistani somewhere is going to pick this up. So there's that reader. And there was, and the challenge with that was writing. And by the way, Unmarriageable is a standalone novel. I wanted to, yes, do a post-colonial retelling, a retelling, but I also wanted to write a standalone novel in its own right. So if you knew nothing about Jane Austen, if you've never watched or heard Pride and Prejudice, you would still be able to read Unmarriageable and enjoy it. So there were these 4 balls I was juggling, which was Jane Austen fans, Pakistani, standalone novel retelling. And I was very, very, scared of what the reception would be. But but so far it's been really wonderful within Pakistan and also Pakistani diaspora. People are, people, I don't know what to say. People are loving it. The reviews from there have been wonderful. It's been called essential reading for young South Asian women. It's I don't know what to say without getting embarrassed. It's done well. Everyone seems to like it.
Accomplish your goals. It's a wonderful book.
Thank you.
Next, I loved all the traditional cuisine you describe in the book and the enormous focus on food. And as a matter of fact, I think you could write a companion cookbook to Unmarriageable. That would be nice.
Yes.
But I wasn't familiar with most of the dishes, although they sounded mouthwatering. So it seemed to me that many of the events in the book, like weddings, revolved around food. And I know that cooking is a hobby of yours.
Yeah.
And is that why you decided to focus so much on the local cuisine? And
no.
Okay. And do you have a favorite restaurant in Atlanta that you could recommend where we could get some of this cuisine?
Oh, sure. Number one, no. I thought I had, like I said, I thought I would have a year at least to write this novel. So I was planning to do some leisurely research, make my tea, open the book, whatever. I don't have time to do any of that. I just wrote what you're reading is really what I wrote. I just went with whatever came into my head. And it wasn't really until the novel was published and the reviews started coming up or interviewers, people such as yourself started mentioning how much food there is in the novel, that really I was like, oh, because if you read An Isolated Incident, there is no food, really. There's very little food in that novel.
Okay.
So I was, I was like, okay, why is there so much food in that novel? And then I realized that the reason is very much because Unmarriageable is a novel that takes place predominantly in the spaces where women live, in domestic spaces. And very much in traditional cultures, the domestic space of a woman used to be traditionally the kitchen and cooking. And one of the unspoken competitions often between women in a lot of traditional societies would be who was a good cook, who could cook well, who couldn't cook, what that would mean for your future. If you couldn't, before the advent of restaurants and takeout and everything, if you couldn't cook, that had practical implications on the health and well-being of your family.
Mhm.
So whether you could cook and whether you were a good cook or not, and how you could organize and balance yourself. So I think a lot of the food in Unmarriageable comes up because of that. One of my favorite scenes in Pride and Prejudice is the one between Mrs. Bennet and Charlotte Lucas's is when Mr. Collins comes to their house for dinner for the first time. And he asks Mrs. Bennet, which of your daughters do I owe this lovely meal to? And she very huffily says, none of them, because we can afford to cook. Now, that was number one, a very Pakistani thing, because, in Pakistan, if just in class-based cultures and stuff, the affordability of a cook or not, and says a lot about the family. But it was the same sort of thing that I saw in Mrs. Bennet also. She's very upset that Mr. Collins thinks that they cannot afford to cook. He's put her on a lower rung of society than they actually are, because they can't afford this cook. But it was little telling details like that. So I don't even know if so what Austen did, what I tried to do also, which is use food for the implications it has for the class hierarchy in the novel, as well as what it means for women's spaces and women. One of my favorite scenes when I was writing Unmarriageable was the quarrel that takes place between Charlotte Lucas's mom and Mrs. Bennet, where they're trying to woo Mr. Collins for both of their daughters by arguing over whether it is more noble to be able to cook, whose chances of being divorced are higher, Charlotte's or Elizabeth's, the one who can cook or the one who can't cook. So I didn't practically. Food appears in the novel because it has a role in the novel. It's not just decoration or decor for me.
Okay.
As for my favorite restaurant you asked in Atlanta, there was one, but I think it got closed. I cook so much Pakistani food myself that when I go out,
You should open a restaurant.
Oh no, I've been asked. I'm actually okay. I will say I am a decent cook, so I've been asked a lot of times to do those things. But the thing is, the lovely thing about hobbies versus a profession is that you can indulge in your hobbies and relax without having to turn everything into some monetary endeavor, and that's the lovely thing about hobbies. So cooking for me is very much a hobby. And as for a companion cookbook with it, I've been asked this it didn't even occur to me, but I've been asked this so many times, and the only thing that's honestly really stalling me is that I'm one of those cooks who I throw things in. Like, I remember when my brother came out to college here, he's 9 years younger than me. When he came out, he would call me up and he'd be like, how much salt? And I'd be like, who asks how much salt? I don't know how much salt to put in anything. And it's the same way with recipes in the book. When people ask me, I'm just like, well, these are the ingredients, and I think you put. So I just throw things in, and in a cookbook you can't be that vague.
Okay.
But it's the way I cook. So we'll see if that ever happens. So.
But I might also point out that, like food, your setting is a central character in the story. You set the book in the small town of Dalipabad, and I was surprised to find out it was a fictional town. I looked it up and I go, that can't be a fictional town. But tell us about the importance of setting and world building and how you created the town.
The Lipabad came into being because, I tried to parallel Unmarriageable to Pride and Prejudice in as many ways as possible. So, for instance, Jane Austen called Pride and Prejudice, and that's the second epigraph in Unmarriageable. She, in a letter to her sister, she said that Pride and Prejudice was her light, bright, and sparkling novel. And, should she put in heavier themes? Should she do this? So I tried to stay very close to Austen's thematic vision for Pride and Prejudice, rather than Marriageable. And by dint of that, even though I'm from a big city myself in Pakistan, because Pride and Prejudice is set in the small village town of Meriton, I had to set, just to parallel it again, I had to set it in a small town. And the thing is that I figured it was, I didn't have time to do research. So I had to make up a town, and I've visited and I know enough of small towns. So it's an amalgamation of a lot of small towns or small town living in Pakistan. But the freedom, I have to say, of making up a town or your own world building, like none of the other stories or short story. I write a lot of short stories and stuff also. With none of my other work, even with An Isolated Incident, I never made a map of anywhere. But with Unmarriageable, I finally had to sit and make a map of what this town looked like, because as much as I might have based it on many other small towns, this is a town in and of itself. And for anyone who has read this, the paperback version, which is what Anel is selling also, there's actually an essay about how Dalipabad, the town, got its name, and it was part of the novel, and it's just I edited it out, and it's one of my regrets now to have edited it out from the novel itself. It was in chapter 3, and I know exactly where, but it does in the paperback. It comes as an essay at one of the bonus materials. There are many bonus materials in the.
And it's very
in the
believable.
paperback.
So
Thank you. Yeah. No, they're from Pakistanis will say, "Is it this one? Is it this one? Is it this one?" I'm like, I'm not telling.
One of my favorite characters in the book was the hilarious marriage-obsessed mother. And is that a real thing in Pakistan? I think you said it was. Was she an exaggeration or closer to the truth? Because like you said, Jewish mothers are like that too.
Yes, they are. And Pakistan or not, I'll tell you, there are a lot of Southern mothers who are like that. And if they're not obsessed with their daughters getting married at this point, they definitely want to know when they're going to become grandmothers. So there's an obsession, which has, because in the US culture, in certain cultures in the US, not being married has become more acceptable and stuff, but everyone wants to be a grandmother. So that's the next step that they're doing. But yeah, I mean, the thing is, there's no, whether it's Jewish culture, Southern culture, Italian, Greek, Nigerian, any traditional culture, there's no one mother that fits the norm, But yes, Pakistan is a very, I call it in the novel, I think I do, marriage industrial complex. Marriage is extremely important. And honestly, part of that is because, with any religious country, I mean, even if we look at evangelical Christianity, the focus on purity culture in there, and not having premarital sex and stuff, and you can equate that with Islam completely, which is, in Islam, premarital sex is actually, I mean, it's a crime. So the only way to really get on with your life is to get married, and if you want a kid, you have to get married. It's just as simple as that. So by dint of that, marriage takes on an extremely important part in a society and culture like that. And so then the marriage obsessed mothers suddenly are thrown into a different light, where it's not a question of being silly or being a caricature or something. It's a very vital part of that society. If you want your daughters to have sex and to have kids, you need to get them married off. And if you want to do well by your daughters, in a lot of traditional cultures, again, it's the whole fact, the whole thing with love marriages and stuff is very important, interesting and fascinating to me, because on the one hand, I often wonder what love really is, because this whole concept of love at first glance and look and falling in love across a room, I don't know what you're falling in love with. You're actually falling in lust with what that person looks like. as far as I'm concerned, because you don't know that person. And it's not until, so that whole love thing, you know, the word love fascinates me so much. It's not till you get to know that person that you should really say we fell in love, but the whole myth and the whole romance around falling in love immediately and what that means, and then getting to know each other, that I find very fascinating over in the US and in certain cultures over here. But you know, marriage, for me, my mother, I got married at 24. I was considered over the hill. Granted, this is many years ago. The age has gone up now, you know. But because marriage was so important and stuff, my mother was real. I was very opinionated. I was not, you know, I was not what is called a good girl back then, because you know, if my father smoked, I'd say, well, why can't I smoke? Lungs are lungs. Just because you're a man doesn't mean. I mean, the morality that is put on women for so many things that men do and take for granted that they can do was just, you know, I think when, for me, it was just, I hated it. And it's not something that you are taught. You either, I don't know, either you just see it and you get it, or maybe you don't. I don't know. But I was one of those people who saw it very early and I got it and I didn't like it. And so I was always pushing against. So, you know, my mother was very worried about who would deign to marry someone like me. And I'll tell you, the what hearing stuff like that. And Alice says it in the book. I gave Alice that part, that one bit where she's sitting at the cafe talking with her sister, and where she says that, you know, I have never heard in my, you know, Alice says, and I had to, you know, I'd never heard in my life, who will you marry? It was always, who will marry you? And what that can do to your self-esteem, to your sight, especially when you're young and you don't know any better, and you're living in a time where the internet is not an easy access for you to realize you're not the only person this is being said to and stuff. It was very difficult. It was tough for me. And I bought a lot of that to Unmarriageable, but I still wanted to stay in tune with, you know, Austen's light, bright, and sparkling. So I didn't put too much of that in it, you know. So but yeah. So the marriage obsessed mothers, yeah, they're around, but the fact is, coming from the culture they do, coming from the what society expects and doesn't, everyone comes from their own history, you know. When you're younger, perhaps you don't look at your parents' history and stuff, but I'm a writer. I think too much. I need to stop thinking. But you know, that did give me a window into the fact that my parents had their own life and their own thoughts and beliefs, and then suddenly, you know, I think we were a mismatch. So as much as my parents might have been a mismatch for me in so many ways, I was a mismatch for them too. And suddenly they had to struggle with a daughter who just wasn't listening to what they believed was right. And you know, I have an essay about that. It's called The Reluctant Writer, because the fact that my father didn't let me be a writer, and then all of this stuff, and it was interesting to me when people read that essay and they say that I've written about them with so much compassion, and about my parents, and even with Unmarriageable, that it's you know, I think Pakistani society can be very interesting, but I think perhaps it's a good thing when you're able to, because no writing is revenge. You know, no good writing comes from wanting to complain or trying to take revenge on anyone. Everyone comes from their own history. And I think, you know, when you're trying to write something, be it the history, you know, a social history, or writing about your parents, or the things that you could or you couldn't do, trying to give a 360-degree, you know, a complete picture is what any writer should aim for.
Okay. And what truths do you want your readers to take away from your novel, if you ever thought
what truths? I think just you know, very important for women to make your own income, and a good income at that, where you can support yourself well. That would be one truth universally, I would say, for everyone. Other than that, just, it's a story. Have a good time. Take from it what you will. Every reader is different, and take from it what you will. Yeah.
Okay. And typically the Atlanta Authors audience includes aspiring and published authors who would like to know about your writing process. Could you tell us a little about your typical writing day, and also your writing method? Like, do you outline and plot everything in advance, or do you sit down at the computer and let the words flow? How does that work for you?
Yeah, I will say, depending on what I'm writing, I do a bit of everything. There's no set process I have. I can go months without writing. and then deadlines, I will say deadlines often work for me. So a lot of the essays I've written have been solicited, and because I have to turn something in, they get written. And sometimes they get written the weekend before they're turned in, but so it comes about that. I don't tend to outline on paper. Perhaps I do think about what I have to write. So some ideas and some details will come to me, but there's no set process. It really depends on what essay I'm trying to write, or is it a short story, or is it, like sometimes for novels and stuff, you can start jotting down conversations between characters that come to you sometimes 20 years before you even start the novel. So anything that comes to me, a nice sentence, a voice in my head, an idea, I just write it down. Now, the sad thing for me is that I tend to write down things on whatever's in front of me.
That's what I do.
So yes, so therefore I tend to lose everything, because then I'm like, where's that paper? Where's that tissue? Where's that tissue gone that I wrote that thing on? Where's it gone? So I have lost so much over the years, because I'll just jot things down and then I won't keep them carefully. And ever since the iPhone, or a phone with where you can make notes has come about, I will say I started doing that, and then I miraculously erased all the notes also. So nothing is safe from me. But yeah, my writing process is, whatever comes to me whenever I jot it down, in case it'll be helpful for anything later on. And when I write essays, what I do try to do with essays and short stories, and I think it's easier to, novels, you can't do this. I don't think so. But essays and short stories, definitely, whether they're 1,000 words, whether they're 10,000 words, is that oftentimes what I try to do the entire draft, whether over hours or over one weekend. Like when I sit down to write, I won't stop till that first draft is done, even if it's a mess, till it's done.
You don't revise along the way.
No, I don't. Reason being that if I'm going to take, you write in a certain tone and in a certain mood, right? So and I just feel that if I don't get the initial tone and mood down, for instance, things happen in life. I mean, not for instance, I mean, things happen in life and we never know what's going to happen. And if I'm writing an essay or a short story, and then I find out one of my parents is sick, or one of my kids or something, that changes my internal landscape and my mood. And then that can reflect on the page. So the mood that I started out with, or the tone, that can change the story or the essay or the whatever too. So if I want to capture that tone, I think it's best to just, it can get exhausting. Sometimes I've written short stories where I've literally not looked up from the page for 13, 14 hours. Wow. I've just captured, or essays, I've just captured that whole thing in one go. And I will tell you, the blessing in disguise with Unmarriageable was 2 months. The tone is so consistent in this novel because I just wrote it. I wrote every day. I would get up, I would sleep, I wouldn't sleep, I would just write. The tone is consistent, and I got it written. I had that deadline. I had to turn in an entire novel. I could have stayed on for an extra semester, but my funding was finishing, and I didn't want to. And I started the MFA when my youngest was 4. He was now 8. He was desperate for me to stop. I was missing my kids also. I don't necessarily recommend 4-year MFAs or PhDs when you're older and your kids are young. It's a very different trajectory from when you're in your 20s or so. It's very hard. So yeah, short times, if you're able to put deadlines on yourself and complete those, if you're able to work under artificial deadlines, those really help too. I need a real deadline. Mm-hmm. But my biggest advice would be, the reason I try to write the whole thing is just to keep that tone for that piece consistent.
But what's the hardest part of writing for you? Like
getting started. I don't want, getting started, and then rejections, which I faced for I've been writing for 20 years. And you become a rejection veteran, which is not a good thing. I think a lot of writers, we focus on the process of actual writing and stuff, and we don't really talk too much about the psychological effects of balancing writing and then with rejection and stuff, because there's a fine line, you know, like acting perhaps, or like music, or any career which where you know, you do your work, modeling, and then you can be rejected for whatever reason. It's such a subjective field. It's, you know, it's like with readers and book clubs. We could both watch the same movie. I could love it, you could hate it. That's not the movie, that's not the director or the actors, you know. They just did what they did. So it's the same with a lot of things, but learning to balance rejection with wanting to write, or believing that your words are important, is its own battle and stuff. And for me, it was a little more particularly hard because writing is not what I wasn't one of those people in the third grade said, oh, I want to write and that's my passion. It wasn't. I came to writing kicking and screaming, a lot of resentment, and then to be rejected for something you didn't even want to do in the first place. And then by the time I realized that, I'd been writing for like 10 years and so long, and then I was like, okay, well, I've put so many years into this damn thing, I'm not going to quit now. I think that's really why I just stuck to it, because I was like, okay, after 15, I'm not going to give up now. I mean, I've just spent so many years in this silly career. So
this sort of leads into the next question. You've had a wide experience with large and small publishing companies and a variety of literary agents. So can you talk a little bit about your road to publication, how you got started on your writer's journey, and maybe share some experience and advice and pitfalls to avoid along the way?
You know, when I started out in 1996, 97, when I decided, okay, I was writing diary entries and just short stories and stuff like that, but I never really sent anything out. I didn't even know it. I didn't even know this. I didn't know anything. And back then, obviously, there was no internet. What there was the two magazines I knew were Poets and Writers and Writer's Digest. I think that's what it is, right? That you could get at Barnes and Nobles or any bookstore or whatever. And even those I came to late. I spent almost, I came to them fairly late when I started writing. I was almost 7 years later. So I taught myself to write. And I know the phrase read as a writer is very popular now, which is, you know, when you read something, you go through it with a writer's pen and you see how has this writer done. So I had no idea. I never did that. I didn't know what I was doing. I think it took me so long is because even, you know, when I first started writing stuff like how to get my character from the bedroom to the kitchen, I'm not kidding. I would do stuff like, he got up, he got out of bed, he put on his shoes, he walked to the door, he turned the knob, he walked down the stair. I didn't know you could jump time, you know? And then I remember I was reading Jean Rhys's Wide Sargasso Sea, and she did something where the character literally moved from one room to the other. And she just did it within 2 sentences. And I remember having this epiphany. I was like, oh, okay, that's how you do it. So a lot of everything that I know in writing has sort of come through those epiphanies when I wasn't even looking at them. And in so many respects, I really taught myself to write just again and again and again. I had a couple of good things happen early on. I had, when I first started writing, I wrote this short story called Papa's Girl. And I was always writing heavy subjects. I think it's just what I naturally gravitated to. And it was about a young boy whose father has taken him to a holiday, a vacation in Bangkok. And he's in the room. He happens to be hiding behind the curtains. He's playing with this young girl that his father has brought to the room. The father has gone out for a second, and they're playing hide and seek, and he hides behind the curtains, and his father thinks he's not at home. So anyway, when the father comes back to the room, the little boy sees things with a girl his age, which no child should have to see. And the story is about what that does to him throughout his life and as an adult, and how that very traumatic experience shapes him. And it was written from a male perspective. And I don't know where that story really came from. I mean, I'd visited with my parents. We'd gone to Thailand when I was young on a vacation, and but nothing that I really saw there don't know. You know, the thing is, people say, where do your stories and stuff come from? So I don't know. I don't know where this boy's voice came came from and whatever. I just wrote the story. I wrote it in an hour or so. And I was living in Denver at the time, and I'd gone to an open mic at a cafe, and I read it. And there was a journal over there, which is now defunct. It was an online journal. They asked if they could publish it, and it was published. And that was a very seminal publication for me, because I had a lot of people write, many people wrote in, including Pakistanis, that I had just given birth to my infant son, my eldest, and there were people saying that I'd written porn, and that I'd written, I didn't deserve to have children, and how could I? And the fact is, if you read that story, anyone who thinks it's porn needs to see a therapist immediately. But the good thing about that, and it happening with almost my first published story, and so early on. I mean, like I said, my son is 19 now, and this was when he was literally a few months old. I mean, one person wrote to me and said, she emailed me and she said, you don't deserve to have any children, and I hope you never have a son. And very quickly, and I have an essay about this. It's in scroll.in about what writing something like that did for me, because it's one thing to be rejected by editors and stuff. It's another to have this sort of stuff, hearing this sort of stuff about you as a person or what you've written. And it is a story about pedophilia, but it's not porn, and it's not, it's a very uncomfortable story. But I quickly had to decide, what sort of writer am I going to be? Am I going to be the sort of writer who's going to flinch and back away when I get feedback like that? Or am I going to write what I want to write and stand up straight and tall? And I went the second route. So
I have so many more questions, but
okay, sorry, I just wanted to, you had asked about the publishing.
I just want to give the audience a chance, because I think we're running out of time. I'd rather them have time to answer these questions. Yes. But you've been wonderful. So I guess I'm going to turn the program over to Hillary Hamlin, who's been collecting questions from the audience.
Okay.
Hillary, thank you very much.
We do have a few questions that have come in through the chat, and it's almost 3 o'clock, so I'll ask you a couple of them, and then we'll open it up to everybody else. And Becky asks, is there a specific reason why you set the book in 1999-2000?
Yeah, there is actually, and it's actually 2000 and 2001. One of the critiques that Austen's work often gets is that she did not write about the greater political happenings in her time. Now, the thing is, I don't think any author should have to do that. And it's an oddly interesting critique, because it's not as if she shied away from what was happening. And she definitely knew what was happening. She was born around the American Revolution. She lived through the Napoleonic Wars. 2 of her brothers were in the Navy. Her cousin Eliza's husband, who was French, was guillotined. And, so she was very aware of what was going on in the larger world. And in fact, in Pride and Prejudice, it's the militia, it's the military that come to Meryton, which is what causes Lydia and Kitty to be all giggly and excited and stuff, because the soldiers have come. So it's not, so I think it's not that Austen shied away from what she was writing. She just chose what she was going to incorporate and not. But what I wanted to do was give contemporary readers a sense of Austen making that choice. So, as we all know, in 2001, a major world event happened. And one of the sections in Unmarriageable ends at August 2001. And I figured, okay, for some readers, this is now going to, they're going to expect either something around this world event, or at least mention of it. And there is none. And I wanted to mirror, as best as I could, the choices that Austen made about the greater political happenings in the world, in Unmarriageable also. So
that's what I figured your reason was, but it was an interesting question to ask.
I
really enjoyed the book as well. So
yeah, thank you. Yeah.
There's another question for, what is your personal revision of the first line of Pride and Prejudice?
Oh, everyone that you read in Unmarriageable is my personal revision from the one that Alice says, from from Alice's, it is a truth universally acknowledged that a single woman in possession of a good fortune must be in want of a husband. I mean, when you put it in terms of the women stuff, you realize how ludicrous and ironic it is, right? Because why would, so, but all of them, and there's so many, the Unmarriageable opens up with one which is, it is a truth universally acknowledged that a girl can go from pauper to princess or princess to pauper in the mere seconds it takes for her to accept a proposal. And this is actually in Unmarriageable itself, there are nods to all of Austen's 6 novels, and this one is a nod to Mansfield Park, because Austen opens Mansfield Park with 3 sisters and the rings that they wear, whether they marry a rich guy, not rich guy, or poor guy, and what that does to their lives and the lives of their children. So this was a direct nod to Mansfield Park, which is my favorite Austen novel. And but I think my favorite retelling of that first sentence in Unmarriageable would probably be, and I don't know it verbatim, but it's something like, I think truth universally acknowledged that people enter our lives in order to recommend books. I think that's my favorite, because I really believe that, because, I mean, you make friends or you meet people, you meet strangers sometimes on, I mean, and if you've ever been to London or New York, or, subway, where there's subway culture, underground culture, you'll see people, you'll sit beside someone and you have a quick chat with them. You don't know their name, then you're never going to see them again, but they're reading something and you're like, what are you reading? And you've been introduced to a book. So, maybe it was fate you sat next to that person because you needed to be introduced to that book. So that's my favorite thing, because I believe that. I think even with friendships and stuff, and this is a novel about sisterhood and friendships also, but even with friendships that go sour, or relationships that go sour, nevertheless, those friendships and those relationships could have introduced you to some of your favorite books, So what you do have to learn to do is compartmentalize those books and with those people if they exit your life, so you can still like those books. But, I think that is my favorite for sure. Yeah.
Well, and we had somebody else who was asking, would you consider posting 1 or 2 of your favorite Pakistani recipes on your Facebook account? So I'll just leave that there and you can.
I actually have an Instagram account, and I have posted some recipes on there with me cooking them also. So if you go to my Instagram account, you can find those. One is for mutton and spinach, and there are a few recipes there, and you'll just find the picture and you'll find the recipes. And then I wrote an essay about tea. And when I first came to the US as a college student, I went to the grocery store and there was, huge tea shelves. And the one tea I couldn't find, there was orange pico and rooibos and lemon zinger and raspberry this and God knows that and blueberry whatever. And I couldn't find any tea, like just normal tea. And I have an essay about that, because and at the end of the essay I give my recipe for my favorite way to make tea. And the essay is called Tea and Me or something. I can send it to you, Anel, if you want, and you can share the links with everyone. So there's that recipe, and that's on my Instagram also. And I show it, I have a post pouring the tea, and that recipe is there too. So yeah, if you go to my Instagram, I'm happy to do it on Facebook. I can post the Instagram posts on Facebook too, but they are there also.
Okay,
so
great.
I do a lot of stuff on Instagram. I love Instagram. So anyone who wants to follow me in all my pictorial non-glory can do so on Instagram.
And since you were talking about favorite books, what books are on your nightstand right now?
Why don't I keep them? I'm not very good with them. I'm reading a book right now by Susan Rebecca White. She's an Atlanta author. And the title of the book, I believe, is We Are All Good People Here. Don't know if anyone's heard of it. It's a very nice book. I'm really, really enjoying it. Anel has the anthology, A Measure of Belonging. Sorry, my title's just got it. And this is 21 writers of color who live in the American South and what that means, what the South means, belonging, longing, all that stuff. It's really, it's short. I like that. It's lovely, and all the essays are really, really. I cannot recommend this highly enough. It's really, really lovely anthology edited by Sanel Barnes. And yes, just I do have an essay in there, but you don't need to read mine. Everyone else's are great. And you know what? I have a lot of books. I read a lot of books. I read several books at one time. Honestly, nothing else is coming to mind right now. I need to start keeping a list. I really like, I mean, if I'm going to recommend a book, I really, really like this writer called Imbolo Mabu. Her novel's name is Behold the Dreamers. I really enjoyed that, really like that. And then there's another writer, Nicole Dennis Ben, and her novel Here Comes the Sun. It's set in Jamaica, but it's told from the point of view of a sex worker in Jamaica who caters to high-end clients, you know, tourists and stuff. It's really wonderful. It's from such a different perspective that you just don't get to see. And is it right in Jamaica? It's one of the islands. Oh dear, I need to make a list and have it permanently on my desk. And then there's another book, and I forget the everything it's called. It's about America and its overseas territories, because a lot of people don't realize, so it's astounding. A lot of people don't realize that Puerto Ricans are American citizens, and you know, and that America does have overseas territories, you know, US Virgin Islands, Guam, etc., and that these are part of America. They're not, you know, and how that happened, why when we see the map of America, we see, you know, just north, and I don't mean, by America, I mean United States, not even Canada, or, you know, but why we don't see the other territories and stuff, and what that's done to the American psyche and country and people when it comes to, you know, these different places. And I'll send you the name of that book. I forget. Oh dear. I shouldn't forget the name. So sorry, I do. It's just too much. I don't even, if it makes anyone feel better, I don't even remember my phone numbers anymore.
Everything's in our you know, our cell phones, so you don't have to remember those anymore.
You know, yeah, I don't, yeah.
Well, thank you very much. I'm going to turn this back over to Anel, who's got some updates, and we really enjoyed this. Thank you so much, Sonia.
Thank you so much. This has been a real pleasure. Thank you so much for inviting me.
And I hate to say it again, I wish there was another word in the English language for thank you, but thank you, Sonia, for being here today. Everyone, please let's give her a video.
No, thank you. Thank you. And now there is another word for it. Maybe not word, but gesture, which is nice. Big smiles are always nice. And you know, thank you, audience, for the questions you asked, and Marilyn for your wonderful moderation and questions. Really appreciate it. Thank you.
All right, to our audience, a few final things before we open it up to audience questions, asking you live, and that is, I do want to add that as readers, I'm sure many of you belong to book clubs. And I just feel compelled to share with you that Unmarriageable has been read by almost all 10, if not all 10, of Bookmiser's book clubs. And in these discussions, the powerful takeaway seems to be this universal story of women. Across time, across oceans, we share so much in common. If you are looking for a rich book club discussion, have your group read Unmarriageable. You will laugh, you will cry, you will think. And if you're not part of a book club and would like to join in on a discussion of Marriageable, whoopee, we have some exciting news. Roswell Reads has started or is starting their first ever pop-in book club. Our first book club event will be January 12th. We will hold 2 virtual meetings, one at 2 and another at 7, to discuss Unmarriageable. We'll have some information for you down in the chat, and also more Roswell Read Pop-In Book Club virtual discussions are in the works. So stay tuned to future Roswell Read emails and newsletters. We'll keep you in the loop about those. And then just an update about our next Atlanta Authors event. We hope to see you all again on Saturday, December 5th at 2 o'clock. Our guest author will be Emily Carpenter, who will be talking about her new book, Reviving the Hawthorne Sisters. Emily Carpenter is the reigning queen of Southern Gothic, and her new book is a wild romp through the Deep South and the hearts of two women connected by blood, lies, and mystery. Atlanta's own Jocelyn Jackson says, get ready to stay up all night. Emily's book will be released October 20th, and autographed copies are available at Bookmiser. We'll have Eventbrite registration for you coming soon, and also available in the chat. All right, so thank you again, everyone. We'll stay on the line for 10, 15 more minutes, and we're going to unmute you, and you can ask our incredible guest author, Sonia Kamal, some questions that we didn't get to during our event. All right, I think everybody's being unmuted. And who's going to go first? Let's see.
Actually, I was trying to. Fran, can you unmute all?
Yes, I feel like we all are getting our next degrees in technology on the spot here.
So all we can do is actually ask people to unmute. So.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So, but they have been given the option to unmute, and now you can go and unmute yourself if you want to ask Sonia a question.
Yeah.
All right, let's not be shy.
Can I ask a question? Can you hear me?
Please.
Oh, okay. So I have to tell you, I'm embarrassed, but I've never read Pride and Prejudice. I picked up your book and I absolutely devoured it. It was delightful. Coming from Canada, there's a lot of diversity, know a lot of different types of cultures. Totally enjoyed it. The question is a little bit different in the sense of, I saw that there were 3 different book covers. I saw one from the UK that's red with, and then there's 2 others in the US. And I'm wondering why so many? How is that decided? And do you have input on those?
I was going to
So,
ask
okay.
that question. I ran out of time. So that's perfect.
Right. Okay. So so this is the cover, the UK cover.
That's the one.
That
Is that
you're
the UK?
referring- This
that
is the British cover. Yes.
Oh, that's pretty.
Right.
This is the British
It's
cover.
beautiful.
Thank you. This is the this one is the US hardback.
Okay. Yes.
This is the US paperback.
Very different.
Yes,
Yeah.
and I will go through all of them. This is the large print cover, US large print.
Oh my God.
So yes, it's available in large print also. So
I didn't
and then
know
there's
that.
the audio one, which doesn't have a cover.
Where
The
is
audio
that?
book.
I would love to hear you.
The large print
The
or
audio.
the audio? Oh, it's on
Audio.
Audible. Yeah, it's on Audible.
Oh, I don't have
Ye-
that. Okay.
No, you can buy it. You don't
get it.
have to have it. I
Oh.
don't believe you have to have it.
They have it at Fulton County Library.
Yeah.
You can get it through the app. They have the
Right.
audiobook. That's
Yes.
how I
Please-
listened to it. It was fantastic.
I did
Thank you.
see that. I read it. I didn't see it. Okay.
Please buy
Thank
it also
you.
if you can.
Okay. But tell me, the red one from the UK really struck
So,
me.
yes,
Like it was
it's-
just so different from the other
It
two
is. So
colors.
this is what happens. Usually authors don't really get a say in the covers. I mean, even if you have in your contract that you don't get final say in your covers. If your editor
Right.
is, usually you have a little bit of input, by which I mean that your editor can ask, do you have any color preferences or how do you see this cover? But let's say you say that I never want any faces on my cover. But then marketing always knows better. So then you get this. So when they were deciding on the hardcover, my editor, who's really lovely, she asked me, what I told her, instead of telling you what I want per se, let me tell you what I don't want. So I said the only thing I do want are peacocks on the cover. you know, peacocks on the cover, and I don't want any faces. I don't want any exoticism or anything, you know, that I'd be uncomfortable with. And I don't want any. I'm a brown, green, blue person, so I don't want any reds, oranges, yellows. I just don't. Those are not my colors. I don't want those. Okay, so so then Penguin Random House with the hardback, they sent me this design. And they sent it in several different colors to me. There was a white, red, blue, and white color. There was a very dark blue with very dark red cover. And this one seemed more festive and in keeping with, I mean, the others were lovely too, but I just felt that this one just seemed to capture the book more. Now for when my book was coming out, I threw a book, you know, there was a book launch and I had a book cake made, and you can see the picture of that book cake on Instagram. I did post it. And a book cake is where, you know, a cake is made and it has the front cover in icing and stuff. So when I went to order this, and I believe I ordered, I forget, was it Kroger? I think Kroger in you know, and the guy says to me, "So you want both these turkeys on the cover?" And I was like, yes, because the one thing I said I did definitely want was I wanted peacocks on the cover. And if anyone's familiar with Austin, there's a very famous peacock cover designed by Hugh Thompson back in the day. Beautiful cover. So I was like, you know, just to keep in consistency with Jane Austen, Pride and Prejudice, etc. I was like, so when he said, "You want both the turkeys on?" I was like, yes, I want both the turkeys on. So then to keep with the peacock theme, because that's what I wanted throughout. I wanted a peacock theme. The hardcover, the large print people, I didn't have a say in any of the in the large print, or, well, the large print people sent me this peacock and I absolutely loved it also. I loved it. The British market is a foreign market, and every time you sell your book in a different country, they get to they can change the title if they want also, and they get to choose their own cover, because they design covers depending on the audience that they think is for this book. So any book that you read in the US, if it has a British version, Israeli version, Indian version, Pakistani version, whatever the hell, in some other different country, it will always, chances are, have a different cover. If it's distributed, it won't, but if a publisher in that country has bought that novel, then it will. So my UK cover was this. Now, because it was foreign rights for me, they didn't ask me. I just got an email one day with, "This is your UK cover." And you just live with whatever, right? After a while, you're like, okay, you know, it's not the US is my home country. This is my publishers for it here. So I opened it. I didn't know what they were going to give me, honestly. I was like, okay, if it's very exotic, I'll scream a little bit, but okay. But then they gave me this. I opened it and I was like, oh, this is gorgeous, okay? And if anyone's familiar with Pakistan, there's truck art in Pakistan. Truck drivers paint their trucks in the most beautiful, elaborate designs. Look it up if you don't know. Truck art in Pakistan. And this is what truck art tends to look like. This beautiful, the motifs, the colors. But I'll tell you, this taught me never ever to tell a book designer not to go with red, orange, blue, you know, not to go with those covers, because these are not colors, like I'd said, I ever wanted. And these colors look beautiful and fabulous. Then when it came to the paperback, I was sent this cover. I like it. It's there are a lot of people who really love it. I personally don't like faces on book covers. I like to imagine my characters in any book and stuff. Also, I think this caters to a slightly different age group and more beachy read. And I think, I don't know if necessarily, I mean, Unmarriageable is definitely, you can take it to the beach and everything. But, you know, I definitely think that you know, this one is, but the thing is, this one is better to buy because it has all the bonus essays and material at the back.
Yes.
So,
yeah.
So yeah, that's how covers happen.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, they're all the same book. Sometimes people are like, "Should we be buying all of them?" I'm like, "Yes, you should, but you don't have to."
We only wish we
yeah,
had a book.
and I was just gonna say that the audio is actually my voice. I narrated it, so you'll be living with my voice for 10 hours. So. Yeah.
And one of the comments in chat was someone who had listened to it, Sonia, and they commented how wonderful it was to hear you pronounce everything. Yes, it was great that you agreed to do that, because not all authors do.
Okay, yeah. No, it's also not all authors necessarily do, even if they want to. This came about because they had actually, when the book sold originally, my agent had asked me if I had any interest in narrating it, and I was like, absolutely not, because you know, there are people who actually go and train for vocalists and stuff for all this stuff, and it's not easy at all, because you have to act. You can't, it's not just a monologue, you know, you just don't say it, you have to act while you're doing it. So I told him, no, I'm looking forward to see who they get. Then a week before it was due in studio, the executive, the editor-in-chief or executive director, I forget now, for Penguin Random House's Audible, wrote to me, and she said, you know, I'd love for you. She'd watched my TEDx talk, and she said, I think you're perfectly capable of doing this, and I'd love you to do it. And I said, no, I don't want to do it, you know, because I don't have any training. And the thing is, with acting, even when you're doing physical acting on the screen or stage, you have your face, your body. With vocal stuff, it's just your voice. It's just your voice. And I said no. And then she wrote me a really beautiful email, which convinced me. She said that, you know, take this as it still really chokes me up that she thought of it so deeply. She said, take this as the dream you never got to live with, you know, your reality of writing. And the fact that she thought about it, and it had never occurred to me for a single second of, you know, and I said, you know, okay, the worst they're going to do is throw me out of the studio. They're going to say, what the hell? And they'll just kick me out. And they do make you do a little audition. I mean, I had to read a couple of pages, send it to them. But like she said, she'd heard my TEDx talk, and she was like, you can do this. So, and I did. And then you go into studio, it's like 4 or 5 days, 10 hours each. There's no retake. So it's not like you read chapter 5 and you decide, oh, I didn't like that, let me do chapter 5 again. You don't get to do that. You literally read the whole book in one go. And from what I've heard, people like it. And I know people like it because sometimes people don't know, they don't realize I've narrated it. So they'll be sitting or whatever, and they're like, oh, the person who narrated your book was really good. And I'm like, okay, thank you. Because apparently I don't sound like how I've narrated the book in when I talk. And that's because also I code switch a lot. In the book, there are people who come, you know, Annie's from, Hammy and Sammy have grown up in the US. There's Sherry is from a different class. Alice is from, so I had to do a lot of different tonal and accents and stuff in the novel, and I was able to do them all. And you know, so it's definitely, the reading that out was definitely acting and not me talking in real life. So that's why a lot of people get, you know, they're like, that was you. Yeah. So it was a blessing. Really, the journey of this book has been a blessing in so many ways. I had a very, very bad miscarriage 12 years ago, and there's an essay in the New York Times about that. And I'd known it was going to be a boy. And anyway, long story short was that the Gardner family in Unmarriageable, the names that I've given to the Gardner kids in my novel are the names that of my kids, including the one I miscarried. And it just keeps him alive in a way. And it's been a nice book. Jane Austen had no idea.
No.
Yeah.
You working on a new book now?
You know, I have several ideas, but I'm not working on anything. I did not expect Unmarriageable to do this well. And it's word of mouth. Thank you for everyone who reads it and recommends it to everyone else. It's really word of mouth, and it's still going strong. And my headspace, I'm still doing so many events. My headspace is still so wrapped up in this. And really, it's taken me so long to have a book published in the US finally. And I just want to enjoy it. Every time I try to pressure myself and say, you need to write a new book, you need to get something out there, I'm like, you know what? Life is short, which means, yes, you should write a new book, but it also means to just stay in the moment and just enjoy what you have, because it's taken so long. It's taken so long. I'm exhausted as a writer. Those of you who are writers here might understand. Yes, it's exhausting. Yeah. Well, you've written what, like your 26, what did you say, 26 book and stuff? I mean, I'm all of how do you do that? But okay.
Exhausting.
Yeah, but you still do it, right? You're able to, I suppose, finish one book and get on with the next, and because that's how you do that. But with me, I'm just sitting here being, oh, I'm going to enjoy this new mint. So, yeah.
Anybody else with a question?
You can ask me anything except my bra size, which is okay too. No, I have this essay about Judy Blume and how Judy Blume is directly responsible for me getting permission to wear a bra. And I was touring in Pakistan in co-ed educational facilities there, and some people can be very conservative. Then I would read that essay out and I would open it up by saying, and it's a very, in the beginning when I read it out, people are like, she could talk about her chest. And then as the essay goes on, you realize that it's actually a very sad essay and everyone's crying by the end of it. And but then there are these men, in a culture or a country where people shy away from saying breast cancer in public because breast, you have two types of men: those who shy away from it, and then those who as kids say it out because it's very funny to say breast, so it's always, I like to read that essay out because as a mother of three, and as it's part of our bodies, they were meant for childbirth and not for the sexualization that's happened to them. So I like to read that essay out, and it's a very point essay. But why did I even bring this up? I forget now. I don't know. Why did I bring this up?
You said we could ask anything.
Oh yes. So how I open up once I've read that essay and everyone's looking at my face, not knowing what to do, I break the ice by saying, you can, except for my bra size, you can ask me anything. And then I get a few stunned people saying, what did she just say?
Hello.
Can you tell us the name again of the book about the sex workers in the islands? I missed that when you were talking about it.
Yes, I believe it's called Here Comes the Sun.
Thank you.
And the other, the book that I was currently reading, I believe it's We Are All Good People Here. And it's by Susan Rebecca White. I think that's her middle name. And she's a local author too. She's an Atlanta author too. And it's really nice. I'm really enjoying it. It's very nice. It takes place from over several different years and stuff. And then the third one was Behold the Dreamers by Imbolo Mabu. Lovely book. Very nice. Very nice books.
Thank you.
Then the nonfiction one, I can't for the life of me remember. I'll send the title to Anel if you want to share it. Thank you. With everyone. Yeah.
Anyone else?
I can ask one question. Oh, is that okay?
No, sure. Yes.
How has the pandemic affected your writing? Does it have current events changed what you're writing or thinking about writing?
There's a anthology coming out in December, and Georgia authors were invited to write COVID essays. It's a COVID anthology, and I believe it's being published by Southern Fried Karma. Is the publisher. And so I was invited to write an essay in that, and actually I that essay was recently accepted in a journal online called Pithead Chapel, and I had not meant to write about COVID or anything, but when I'm asked to write, then I manage. But otherwise it's been, I think we're getting a little more used to the situation now, but in the beginning it was very hard to write something, because when you are confronted with things with mortality and you have no control over plagues or stuff like this, and it's all over the world, you start to question. At least I started to question, I know a lot of other authors did too, about the importance of words, or what it even means. I mean, do you want to spend your time writing in front of your computer, or you want to spend what might be, who knows, if you get corona or COVID and that's it for you, do you want to spend that time writing, or you want to spend that with your kids or your dogs or your, I mean, how do you want to spend those days? If someone was to tell you this is it, your last week on earth, are you really going to frantically try to finish that book? Some people might. Everyone is so different. But for me, I suffer from what I call existential depression anyway, and survivor's guilt, which is, you know, I think a lot of people get into writing, and I stuck to writing, like I say in my TEDx talk, because as wonderful as acting was, and it was my dream, the reason the movie that made me want to be an actress was, it was turned out to, when I was older, I realized, a social issues movie. And it was about a girl who'd been kidnapped and she got sold into the brothels and stuff. And it was looking at that movie and that actress that made me say, I want to act. And I think then I was started writing, and I think, you know, I never, and back in the day, and honestly, it's one thing when you have directors and producers banging on your door offering you roles. It's another to go from audition to audition. I didn't want to do audition to audition when I was older, but I think I stuck to writing. Number one, because I realized with acting, you're telling someone else's story. With writing, and because I had no control over my life in the early, you know, in my teenage years and stuff, writing is an act of control also. You are the storyteller. You are God over here. You get to decide what story you're going to tell. Unlike in acting, you're acting out someone else's story. So I think that's the reason, because it baffled me for the many years as to why the hell I hadn't just, you know, why did I stay with writing? And I think it's because for me, it gave me back an autonomy, which my father and my culture had taken away from me. But with COVID, it's the, you know, with the pandemic starting and stuff, I think it was the same sort of, how do you want, you know, what do you want to do? And what does, you know, it blocked me for a long, it did. It was very hard to do something. Then I started getting solicited for various essays and stuff. I have one that just came out in apartment therapy. I never thought I'd write for Decor Site. And it's an essay on nostalgia and furniture and what memory means when it comes to how we decorate our houses. And, you know, I had to write that. Then I was asked to do several other things. So because I was solicited to write several things, I just started writing again. But the fact is that I've not been able to generate anything of my own. But when I'm asked to write something, then I'm deadline driven in that respect. Because I feel I would hate to, if someone asked me and I agreed to write something, I would hate to not deliver. That would not be nice. So, yeah. But I think what the pandemic's done for most people is that has really, for even if it's for a moment, made them realize perhaps what's important. You know, we get so caught up in the everyday and this isn't fair and that isn't fair. And for me, writing is an act of, life is sometimes not fair for a lot of people. Unfortunately, it's very unfair. And I think what books can offer us, hopefully, is a picture of where writers are able to make life a little more fairer. You know, I mean, maybe in real life in Austen's time, the Bennett sisters would never have gotten married and they would have been destitute and Lydia would have come home pregnant and ruined. But in the pages of her book, she gave a different ending. And that's what gives us hope, right? And that's why books give us hope and movies can give us hope. And as you can see, like I said, existential depression. So I do have a lot of existential questions. I want someone to tell me why life is unfair. Why one kid gets to enjoy everything in life and the other kid is, you know, gets cancer and dies. I don't know. It's very perplexing. Anyway, not to go in that direction, sorry. But yeah.
Well, I would just like to, with smiles.
Yes, big ones.
Thank you so very much for spending this valuable time with us. We know you have families, you have a cat.
Oh, no, thank you.
That you need to know the outcome of.
They haven't come back yet. They're still at the vet. So yeah, which is good. Yeah.
But your honesty, sharing your talent with us today has been so wonderful. So thank you. And to our audience, don't forget to register for our December 5th event with Emily Carpenter or join us for our pop-up book club discussion of Unmarriageable. Don't forget, Book Miser has signed copies of Unmarriageable and also Emily Carpenter's book. So we hope until we meet again, everybody enjoys reading. Thank you all. Enjoy the day.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you and goodbye.
Thank you all for joining us.
Okay, how do I get off?
And now I went back yesterday and bought the book because I wanted to get on the site and I wanted to have my book, with me. And so after I called you, I called Pam and she forgot it. So thanks.
Anel, somebody's wondering how, when ordering online, how do they request a signed copy?
You ordering online is through a distributor, and that's not signed. To get a signed copy, you need to call Bookmiser
Okay, that's
or
what.
email us. Mhm, mhm.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I don't know how to get off. Hey, Chuck. I don't know how to get off. Okay, I see it. Leave meeting.
Shall we go ahead and close the session?
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thanks, Anel. That went great.
Thank you
Yes.
both. Oh my gosh, we did it.
Yeah.
We had 54 people at the max and 35 stayed till almost 3:30.
Yeah, till the very end.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's great.
I did note though that 13 of those folks were us.
Oh.
Yes.
Well, but yeah.